Hello, lovers of scary stories. Today I want to tell you a few creepy and unexplained stories from Reddit. Some of them I found in an old thread, and that's actually a good thing, because the stories are interesting, and many of you were probably still quite young back then and are unlikely to have heard anything like this. At least, I doubt I'm the only one who thinks so. So get comfortable, grab yourself some chips or snacks, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Enjoy watching. This is a personal story that happened to me, my brother, and our friends. Not one of those, a friend of my uncle's sister, stories. I'm telling the absolute truth, without any exaggeration. These are the facts, and you can decide for yourselves what it was. I grew up in a small mountain town in Utah, far from civilization, deep in a canyon. If you walked out the back door of our house and crossed a field about 180 meters long, you'd reach a river and a small wooded area. We always called that place the riverbed, for obvious reasons. That summer, I was about to turn 16. Our house was the main party spot. Always decent gatherings, lots of people. Most nights ended with a bonfire in the yard, guitars, relaxing, staring into the fire and the stars. One night, we decided to start telling scary stories. One of my close friends lived about a mile down the road, and his house was roughly the same distance from the same riverbed. The conversation slowly shifted from made-up stories to real, creepy things that had happened to us. My friend quickly became the center of attention. He told 2 stories. The first happened when he was younger, around 10 or 11, he said. In the middle of winter, he woke up late at night and went downstairs to get a glass of water. The window above the kitchen sink looked directly toward the riverbed. As he was drinking, he looked up and saw a man's face in the window, staring at him from outside. He dropped the glass, it shattered on the floor, and his mom ran in to see what had happened. They turned on the porch light and looked outside. There was no one there, and no footprints in the freshly fallen snow. They decided it must have been a reflection. The second story happened a couple of weeks later. He was playing in the snow just after dark when his dog suddenly started barking and growling toward the riverbed. He looked around and saw nothing, but felt a strange sensation in his stomach and started heading back toward the house. He was almost at the back door when he heard the dog yelp behind him and then rush toward him. He turned around again, nothing. He ran inside. He ended by saying that ever since then, he'd always been afraid of the riverbed and avoided going there. Naturally, being a group of young guys with something to prove, a few of my friends immediately decided they wanted to go down there and investigate. The night was clear, almost a full moon, with pretty good visibility. The first group, 5 people, left the rest of us, about 15, at the bonfire. They were gone for maybe 10 minutes, clearly not long enough to actually reach the riverbed and explore, and then came running back. A few of them said they'd seen something, though nothing especially strange. The field between our backyard and the riverbed was often visited by cows, and deer, coyotes, and other wildlife were common. We calmed them down and went back to playing guitars. One of my older brother's friends, who had been sitting with his back to the riverbed, had been unusually quiet since they returned and kept turning around to look behind him. Given that he was about 6 feet 5 inches, 195 centimeters, and weighed around 240 pounds, 110 kilograms, that behavior was very out of character. Eventually, a second group formed. This time, we went inside and grabbed flashlights, hockey sticks, baseball bats, anything we could find, just in case. There were about 10 of us now, including me. We made it about halfway to the riverbed when I was suddenly overwhelmed by a very dark feeling. I'd call it fear, but it was more than that, just a deep sense that something was wrong. I'd only felt something like it once before, a couple of years earlier, when someone pointed a gun at me and I genuinely feared for my life. Then we heard a quiet whistling sound, almost like wind through trees, but we hadn't reached the forest yet. Then it came from another direction, and then suddenly from right behind us, so fast that no human could have moved that silently. We panicked and huddled together. The whistling happened again, and two people with flashlights shone them to our left at the same time. For a split second, we saw a dark silhouette about 3 to 4 feet tall, 100 to 120 centimeters, with red reflections in its eyes. It immediately bolted away at insane speed. Realizing we'd all seen it, we ran back to the house. When we got back to the bonfire, we decided we didn't want to stay there anymore. We put out the fire in a very guy way. Everyone stood in a circle and peed on the embers until they stopped glowing, then we got in our cars and left. About an hour later, my brother and I came back home. As we pulled into the driveway, we saw that the bonfire was burning again. Still nervous, we grabbed a hose to put it out, and discovered that all the firewood that had been stacked a couple of meters away had been thrown into the pit. Very strange. This is where the story gets really interesting. The next day, we had Sunday family dinner. A bit of background: my dad grew up in the 1950s in the neighboring house. Our parents asked if we'd had a good time the night before. My brother replied, "Yeah, but I don't think anyone will want to come over again." "Why? Did you see the boogeyman?" my dad joked. "Yeah, Dad, we saw the boogeyman," my brother laughed. "Seriously?" "I saw him too," my father suddenly said. I was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. I was sick with a fever, but I remember this clearly. One evening at dusk, I looked outside and saw a dark figure near the mailbox. Its head was slightly lower than the mailbox, and its eyes were glowing red. My brother and I looked at each other. Neither of us had told him what had happened, and we both realized our dad was telling the truth. A few weeks later, we were having another bonfire when we noticed that the riverbed in the distance seemed to be glowing. We jumped into a car and drove almost to my friend's house. From there, we could see that the riverbed was on fire. We called the fire department. Since it was state land, we decided to drive closer while waiting for them. The fire wasn't large, and when we got near it, we saw that only grass was burning in a small clearing. It almost looked like we could stomp it out. It looked as though several lines of grass were burning in a circle about 3 meters wide. We put out the fire, and one of my friends began walking in a circle, following the burned grass and looking toward the center. Then he climbed a tree, went up a couple of feet, and said, "Guys, it's a pentagram." The strangest part was that the fire had already been burning for at least 20 to 30 minutes before we arrived. Yet the grass had burned into a perfect pentagram, without spreading any further. Very strange. A few days later, we learned that a couple of years earlier, people had been arrested in the riverbed area for devil worship. They regularly burned pentagrams into the ground and sacrificed animals at the center. Over the following year, the story spread through the town and became a sort of local legend. In the spring, my brother took a mythology course, and the final project was to create an original myth. Knowing this story, the professor suggested that my brother use it and add more depth. Mixing Greek mythology with real life, my brother created a character named Nephis Goffin, or Goffin for short, a mortal cursed by Zeus for having an affair with Hera and condemned to eternal torment as a river demon. But backstory wasn't enough. He decided he needed proof. We decided to recreate that first night, a bonfire with 15 to 20 people, guitars, scary stories, and then stories about it. We called it a ritual, and it felt like it truly attracted whatever was out there. After a couple of hours, we decided it was time. We headed toward the riverbed with a video camera in night mode and a spotlight. Everyone had flashlights, air rifles, everything you could imagine. We made it about halfway when that dark feeling returned. And again, I need to emphasize this sensation, fear, the kind where you know something wants to kill you. This time, we didn't hear any whistling, but we could hear something moving very fast, very close to us. We couldn't catch it in the flashlight beams or on camera, so we decided to keep going. We were about 60 feet, around 18 meters, from the riverbed, where a small hill separated the field from the river. The person in front stopped and asked for the spotlight. He shone it on the hill, and there, next to a tree, stood the black figure. Glowing red eyes. About 4 feet tall, around 120 centimeters. It looked like a child in a hooded cloak, but it was so black it seemed as if it were made of a black hole itself. It just stood there, staring straight at us. It felt like an eternity. We all stared at it, and someone yelled, "Are you all seeing this?" Meanwhile, the cameraman kept repeating, "Focus, damn it, focus." Then it slowly took 2 steps toward the tree, disappeared behind it, and never came out the other side. To hell with the project. To hell with everything. Panic erupted, and everyone ran back toward the house. We reached the backyard, where we had to climb over a barbed wire fence. The house was well lit outside, so we figured we'd be safe once we were over the fence. The cameraman was last, still on the field side, pointing the camera toward the riverbed. Suddenly he realized he was alone. He spun around and jumped the fence. Once inside, we tried to calm down and decided to watch the footage. We reviewed everything, looking for anything strange at the beginning. Nothing. Then we got to the moment near the hill. The camera absolutely refused to focus. It was pointed at the hill, completely blurry. The cameraman lowered it, looked at the ground, perfect focus. He raised it again, blurred. You can hear it move behind the tree. And then, suddenly, a sharp focus. Everything clear. Disappointed, everyone started talking about what we'd seen. My brother rewound the tape to the beginning and sat right in front of the TV, silently staring at the screen. He paused, rewound, went frame by frame through the blurry section, trying to find something, but nothing useful appeared. When he reached the moment where we were almost back at the house, my friend, the same one who had told the stories at the beginning, noticed something by accident and said, "Stop. Rewind." They went frame by frame again, as the cameraman was climbing over the fence. At the moment of the jump, the camera accidentally tilted slightly to the left, toward the yard. And near a tree, less than 5 feet, about 1.5 meters, away, stood the small black figure with glowing red eyes, in the yard. Less than 10 feet, about 3 meters, from most of us standing there. No one had seen it. No one knew it was there. But we had it on camera. Back then, we used VHS tapes, actual cassette tapes for movies. My brother and a friend edited the video and made 2 copies, one for us, and one for the professor as the project. Those tapes contained footage from that night and much of the story I've told you. A couple of years later, my brother and I decided to rewatch the tape, but we couldn't find our copy anywhere. We searched the entire house. Nothing. Not wanting to give up, we called the mythology professor, who we knew had shown the tape to his classes, and asked if we could borrow his copy. Of course, he had lost his tape too. To this day, I have never gone back to the riverbed. I don't like telling this story when relatives or friends ask, because I know everyone thinks I'm either lying or that youth and fear played tricks on me. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. It was real. And although I don't know what it was, something chose to come and torment me and my friends in our youth. I am 100% certain, it wanted us all dead. One summer, when I came home from college, a couple of friends and I got jobs as janitors at a local movie theater on the morning shift. The theater was fairly new, built in the early 90s, with 3 large theaters, 4 medium ones, and 3 small ones. My job was to clean all the theaters during the shift from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. The drive from my house took about 20 minutes. The theater was in the middle of nowhere. We were told that before construction, the area had been partly swamp, partly farmland, with the rest belonging to a local nature preserve. For the first couple of weeks, nothing unusual happened. Usually, only 2 or 3 people worked the shift. Most of the time was spent alone, cleaning and listening to music on an iPod. Occasionally, We'd cross paths with the day shift and tell them about equipment issues or things that needed attention. One day, the manager asked if we'd noticed the front doors being unlocked in the mornings. When I said no, he told me that customers, mostly women, had complained about a tall, thin man in a suit who followed them from theater to theater, sometimes even into the restrooms. Several times, terrified women ran to the manager, describing a man over 6 feet tall, dressed in a black suit and a bowler hat, slowly following them. Police were called more than once. The teens on the day shift nicknamed him the Tall Man. Although he mostly followed women, male employees sometimes saw him slipping into theaters as well. A few times, they tried to chase him, thinking he was sneaking in without a ticket, but they never found anyone. We had 12 theaters total, but Theater 5 was the worst. No one wanted to clean it. When I first started working there, I was pretty naive about ghosts and spirits and didn't understand why even my boss was nervous about Theater 5 and kept assigning it to me. What made it different was its location. It was behind the restrooms in the lobby. To reach it, you had to walk down a long corridor. Because of this layout, you were completely isolated, especially at 4 a.m., when the rest of the staff was on the other side of the building. Janitors complained of nosebleeds, constant headaches, and the feeling of being watched. The first supernatural experience I ever had happened there. It was a normal morning. I had just finished sweeping the lobby and was cleaning up cups and trash in Theater 5. According to procedure, you first collect the leftover cups and popcorn, and only then vacuum and sweep. I was listening to my iPod, and while I was picking up cups, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing right behind me. I kept turning around, sometimes even pulling out my earbuds and calling out, "Is anyone here?" Of course, no one ever was. Like I said, it was a normal morning, and I had no reason to expect anything strange. I kept working. About 20 minutes later, I was in the top row, sweeping debris out from under the seats, when I suddenly heard footsteps. Someone was running. I looked down and briefly saw a small blonde boy at the front of the theater, turning the corner into the long hallway and fleeing the room. I dropped my broom immediately and ran after him. I sprinted into the hallway, then into the lobby, but the child was nowhere to be found. Walking a little farther, I saw my boss, Jeff, smoking by the entrance. "Who was that?" I asked. Jeff looked at me, hesitated for a moment, then laughed. I'll never forget how casually he said it. "Oh. So you met Charlie." Charlie was another reason for customer complaints. Several times, patrons claimed that during movies, a blonde boy would run up and down the aisles, making noise and causing disruptions, always in Theater 5. When an usher came to investigate, the child had already vanished. The female staff affectionately named him Charlie because he resembled the character from Willy Wonka. Charlie also knocked over trash cans, scattered papers, hid objects, and generally made the morning janitor's job a nightmare. He was more of a nuisance than a threat. We assumed he might be the son of the tall man, but they were never seen together. My only encounter with the tall man happened a couple of weeks after the Charlie incident. At the time, I hadn't heard anything about him. If I had known, I probably would have quit immediately. Usually, if you arrived first in the morning, one of your tasks was to go upstairs to the projection booth and turn on the lights in all the theaters. It wasn't difficult, except that the projection level was filled with life-sized cardboard cutouts of movie characters and huge posters, which looked pretty unsettling in the dark. I had done this several times before, and since I arrived first that day, I went up to turn on the lights. The projection hallway was dark, and we normally brought a flashlight. That morning, I couldn't find one. I later discovered it had been thrown away, another one of Charlie's pranks, so I walked down the dark corridor, flipping light switches as I went. I hadn't slept at all the night before. I'd been watching the Andy Griffith Show. I remember that clearly because I was whistling the theme song as I walked. Once again, I felt like I was being watched. Several meters ahead, in the IMAX projection area, something was staring directly at me. I stopped whistling and peered into the darkness. At first, I thought it was just a cardboard cutout. There were plenty of those up there, so I didn't think much of it and was about to flip the next switch. Then it moved. I froze. What I thought was a cardboard figure was actually a hunched human silhouette. It was quietly whistling the Andy Griffith theme, copying me, but much slower and more drawn out. Slowly straightening up, it rose to its full height, at least 2 meters tall. It was a man. In the glow of red emergency lights and projector monitors, I could only see his silhouette. He began moving toward me, still softly whistling the same melody, now terrifying. I wanted to run, but my legs felt glued to the floor. My mouth went dry. I had no thoughts at all, no idea what to do. The tall man approached slowly. He walked with a slight sway, as if limping on his left leg. I can't say for certain. After 3 or 4 steps, he suddenly stopped. Something caught his attention. He turned and walked toward an office at the end of the hallway. That was enough. I turned around and ran down the stairs, waiting near the entrance until the others arrived. When my boss and the rest of the crew showed up, I told them what happened. They explained that the tall man did exist, but that he wouldn't hurt me. I didn't care. That single encounter was enough for me to quit on the spot. When I was about 13, my grandparents had a house on the waterfront. The property sat on a heavily wooded peninsula. Since my grandparents spent half the year in Florida, they allowed their, supposedly adult, children to use the house as a vacation spot. The forest contained many fairly large creeks flowing into a bigger body of water that the house overlooked. In some places, these creeks were deep enough to form swimming holes, slow-moving, deep pockets of water often close to the shore. One of my favorite swimming holes was about 12 to 15 feet deep, around 3.5 to 4.5 meters, and visibility became very murky if you went more than a meter underwater. These measurements might not be exact, it's been over 10 years, and everything seems bigger when you're a scared kid. As a child, I didn't think twice about how stupid it was to swim there alone. What made it even cooler was a long rope someone had tied to a thick tree branch. You'd swing out over the water and let go at the peak, dropping straight in. One night, while my parents were asleep, I had what I thought was a brilliant idea. I decided to go swimming alone. When I reached the hole, I challenged myself to touch the bottom. I pulled the rope as far back from the water as I could, standing on my toes. Holding tight, I ran, swung out, and let go. Amazingly, and I mean that literally, I reached the bottom. Proud of myself, I pushed off, expecting the current to carry me back to the surface. Instead, I rose only a few inches and was violently pulled back down. Confused, I tried again, same result. Panicking, I realized my swim trunks were caught on a submerged stump or log. At the time, though, it felt like some creature had grabbed me. I struggled desperately to free myself. This part is burned into my memory. My vision began to darken around the edges, tunnel vision. Bright spots flashed in what little sight I had left. My lungs burned with unbearable pain from lack of oxygen. It felt like they were on fire. I could feel myself losing consciousness. My muscles weakened. My eyes rolled back. My limbs felt impossibly heavy. The urge to fight faded. And then, it happened. Through the murky water, someone appeared. They freed my swim trunks from the stump, grabbed me, and pulled me to the surface. Then they were gone. No trace. Nothing. The only physical proof of what happened was a massive hole torn into one leg of my swim trunks. Looking back on it now, I'm almost certain that my rescuer was a product of oxygen deprivation. Most likely, my brain mobilized its last remaining resources in a desperate attempt to survive at a critical moment. That sudden movement probably tore my swim trunks, freeing me. It's also possible that the same part of my consciousness forced my body to swim upward, though natural buoyancy may have played a role as well. I apologize for the length, but this incident was so disturbing that I can't help but describe it in detail. During my service in Kosovo, our unit frequently carried out night missions that required us to move quickly over long distances in order to reach evacuation points before dawn, all while remaining undetected. At night, we often noticed strange things, but nothing like what happened during this operation. On one reconnaissance mission, we were deployed into a remote area to identify the transportation of mortar shells and landmines. We had until sunrise to evacuate. The distance we had to cover was just over 17 kilometers. The terrain wasn't heavily overgrown, and intelligence reports suggested minimal risk. A nearly full moon, because of course there was, made the mission seem easy, assuming no contact. Our usual group consisted of 4 people, but this time we brought along 3 new recruits for training. For safety, I took the rear position, and a soldier, let's call him L, walked just ahead of me. We worked well as a pair, covering each other. We had already covered about 10 kilometers without incident and were on schedule. It was time to move toward the extraction point beyond a large hill near a village, not too close, but close enough. After checking personnel, ammunition, and gear, the group moved out. As the rear guard, I started last. Just as I was about to move, I heard a noise in the trees about 50 meters away. I turned and saw that L was looking in the same direction. He heard it too. The main group kept moving, since the newer guys in the center weren't yet used to checking their rear every 20 meters, and we started falling behind. It was probably an animal, but L and I advanced using alternating cover tactics. The noise happened again, and I ordered L to catch up with the group while I stayed behind after the next movement. Once in cover, I heard the noise again and saw trees moving about 15 meters away. Everything went silent. For 2 full minutes, I stayed completely still, controlling my breathing and scanning left, right, and forward. L and the group cautiously moved toward the noise. They flanked the area and secured the zone I had marked. When they were in position, I joined them. Nothing. No tracks. No signs of anything. The guys started joking about how L and I had gotten scared and fallen behind, good-natured teasing. We moved on again. I took up the rear once more, L ahead of me. This time, there were no sounds at the start. After about 2 kilometers, we reached an orchard we needed to pass through. The moonlight was bright, and the trees were spaced far apart, so we used them for cover. As we moved through the center, just before entering the orchard, I heard something again. This time, it sounded like the laughter of a little girl. That wasn't something my imagination would normally come up with. I had been expecting animals. L was already about 20 meters ahead, waiting for me. I took cover by a tree and scanned the area. Suddenly, one of the trees caught my attention. A face appeared in its branches. Human-like. As I focused, I could make out the features of a little girl. She turned toward me, smiled, waved, and laughed, not maliciously, then vanished back into the tree. I was in shock. There was no way I was going to tell the group. Instead, I ran to catch up with L, keeping what I had seen to myself. I decided I must have lost my mind and said nothing. We reached the extraction point and left. 2 weeks later, I was assigned to provide security for a team of bomb disposal specialists working in a familiar area. Meanwhile, my main unit returned to the exact zone where L and I had experienced that disturbing incident. The others were still joking about it. I stayed silent, and honestly, I was relieved not to be going back. While escorting the sappers, I helped them locate a recently planted minefield in an area where children passed daily. They warned the nearby village and began detonating the mines on site. I genuinely admire those specialists. When I returned to base, the commander thanked me. In good spirits, I headed to the barracks, enjoying a rare chance to rest. The others hadn't returned yet. I hadn't even taken my boots off when the door burst open amid laughter. Everyone was joking, except Elle. He looked furious and told everyone to screw off. One of the guys noticed me and blurted out, "Hey, Elle says he's never going back to your favorite area again." I gave a crooked smile and waited for things to calm down. A few days later, Elle and I were escorting reconnaissance troops. Suddenly, he asked, "What did you see back then?" I shrugged. "I don't know. My imagination got the better of me." His reply sent chills down my spine. "I know you saw her." "I did too. Tell me I'm not crazy." "Numb," I muttered. "You're not crazy. Where did you see her?" "In the tree," he said. I had never shared any details of my vision with Elle. I hadn't hinted at anything that could lead him to that answer. When I saw the girl, he was about 40 meters away and physically couldn't have known where I was looking. Now, here's a story from a subscriber. It's not very long, but it's definitely worth your attention. Mr. Nick was a kind, decent guy. We weren't super close friends, but whenever one of us needed support, the other would show up, and we'd talk until morning, sometimes while drinking. That day, I was home. It was evening, and the power went out across the entire city. I was cooking dinner when I got a message from Mr. Nick. I don't remember exactly what he wrote, but it was clear he urgently needed help. I threw on a jacket and ran over. He lived a couple of streets away, so it didn't take long. His apartment was on the 7th floor, and of course, the elevator wasn't working due to the outage. I ran upstairs and found his apartment door open. I entered slowly and saw Mr. Nick sitting at the kitchen table. A candle was burning in front of him. He was nervously smoking. I walked up, about to ask what kind of emergency he needed help with, but he cut me off. "Listen, Dima, this is messed up. Total insanity. Before you say anything, let me explain what happened." About 30 minutes earlier, he had come home, entered the building, and since there was no electricity, started climbing the stairs using his phone flashlight. He was already on the 2nd floor when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around, and nearly died of fear. Some old woman was standing there. He had just passed that spot, she hadn't been there before. He stood there for a few seconds, staring at her, then tried to calm himself. "Well, she's just an old lady. What's there to be afraid of?" He offered to help her, reached out his hand, but she just stood there, staring at the floor. Her headscarf covered her forehead. "Not really eager to help," he said. "Well, if you don't need help, goodbye." And hurried upstairs, taking 2 steps at a time. By the 4th floor, he realized how ridiculous it was, a 30-year-old man, athletic, terrified of some old woman. Feeling ashamed, he decided to go back and help her. He turned around, and she was standing right behind him again. At that moment, ice ran down his spine. Without a word, he turned and ran up the stairs. By the 6th or 7th floor landing, he calmed down, looked around, and she was gone. Thank God, he thought. He walked to his apartment, started unlocking the door, and accidentally looked back. That damned hag was standing on the landing. His hand started shaking. He barely managed to open the door. As soon as he did, she shoved him aside and flew into his apartment. At first, he was ready to run back outside, but after a minute that felt like an eternity, he thought. What the hell? Some hag in my apartment? What? I can't handle an old woman. He went inside, searched every room, sprinkled flour between rooms to track footprints. Nothing. She vanished, like she'd never been there. Mr. Nick stopped talking. I asked. So let me get this straight, you're saying there's some random old woman in your apartment right now? Without looking at me, he said. Yes. And understand, she couldn't have left unnoticed. I would have heard the front door. He explained that he called me so I could stand by the doorway while he searched each room. He believed she was moving between rooms while he searched. And I need your help, Dima. If not you, I don't know who. And there's no power. My phone's dead. Help me, brother. Of course, I couldn't refuse. Even though part of me wanted to say he was drunk or lying, I couldn't. For about 2 hours, we searched while I stood guard and he moved around with the candle, shining it into every corner. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. Listen, Mr. Nick, no offense, but I think you should just lie down and sleep. It's late, and I have work in the morning. He didn't argue. He was exhausted too. We said goodbye, and I went home. The next morning, I called him. No answer. 5 minutes. An hour. The next day, nothing. On the third day, I went to his place and again found the door open. I went inside and found him dead, lying on his back in bed, staring upward. His face was frozen in a terror I can't put into words. I immediately called the police and an ambulance. 2 days later, I was told he had died of a heart attack. The police found nothing unusual. Except for one thing. Bare footprints. And handprints. On the ceiling of his apartment. That's all for today. Write in the comments which stories you liked the most, and share your thoughts on the video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That's it, I think I said everything and didn't forget anything. See you later.